The year was 2147, and humanity had finally reached the stars. It wasn't just a dream anymore. People were living on planets far away from Earth. Among those distant worlds was Eos 7, a rocky planet with red soil and two suns that painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The colonists there worked hard to build a new life. They grew crops in domed greenhouses, mined minerals from the ground, and dreamed of making Eos 7 their home. Daniel Carter was one of them. He wasn't a hero or a soldier, just an engineer who liked fixing things. His hands were calloused from years of work, and his face carried lines that spoke of long days under alien skies. Daniel had left behind his wife, Rachel, on Earth when he volunteered for the mission. She stayed behind because she believed in what they were doing, even if it meant being apart. They talked through video calls every week, sharing stories about their lives. But lately, Daniel felt uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. On this particular evening, Daniel was walking back to his quarters after finishing repairs on a mining drone. The air outside was thin but breathable, thanks to the atmospheric processors scattered across the colony. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows over the settlement. Everything seemed peaceful. Too peaceful. Laura Hayes sat inside the communications hub, staring at her screen. She was young, barely into her 20s, with curly brown hair tied into a messy bun. Her job was simple: monitor incoming messages and keep the colony connected to Earth. But tonight, something strange appeared on her monitor, a signal unlike anything she'd seen before. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. When she tried to trace its origin, the system froze. "What's going on?" John Miller asked as he entered the room. He was older than Laura, maybe in his 40s, with graying hair and broad shoulders. Once a soldier, now a farmer, John still carried himself with the same confidence he'd had in the military. He leaned over Laura's shoulder, squinting at the screen. "I don't know," Laura admitted. "It's not coming from Earth, and it's not one of ours." Before they could figure it out, the lights flickered. Then came the sound, a low rumble growing louder by the second. Both Laura and John rushed outside to see what was happening. What they saw made their blood run cold. In the sky above, massive ships descended like dark clouds, blotting out the stars. Their shapes were angular and menacing, glowing faintly with blue energy. They didn't look friendly. As the ships hovered closer, the ground trembled beneath their feet. People began running, shouting, pointing at the sky. "Everyone, get inside," John shouted, trying to keep calm. But panic spread quickly. Children cried, mothers grabbed their kids, and men scrambled to protect their families. No one knew what these ships were, or what they wanted. Then came the message. A voice boomed across the colony, deep and cold, speaking in perfect English. "You are trespassing on sacred ground. Surrender now, or face annihilation." The words echoed in everyone's ears. Laura felt her knees go weak. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humanity had been careful, hadn't it? They'd chosen uninhabited planets to avoid conflict. Or so they thought. Daniel heard the announcement too. He froze mid-step, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment he stood there, staring up at the monstrous ships. Then reality kicked in. He turned and ran toward the nearest building, where other colonists were gathering. Fear filled the room as everyone whispered questions no one could answer. "We need to do something," someone said. "We can't just wait here." But what could they do? These aliens, whatever they were, had weapons and technology far beyond anything the colonists possessed. Even John, who had once fought in wars, looked helpless. Still, he tried to take charge. "Listen up," he yelled, silencing the crowd. "We may not have much, but we're not defenseless. We've got tools, machines, and brains. If we work together, we might stand a chance." Daniel nodded slowly. John was right. Sitting around wouldn't save them. They needed to act fast. With John leading the way, a small group of volunteers, including Daniel and Laura, began gathering whatever they could use as weapons. Mining drills became makeshift rifles, welding torches turned into flamethrowers, and pieces of scrap metal were fashioned into crude armor. As they worked, Laura kept glancing at the sky. The alien ships hadn't moved yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Why aren't they attacking? She wondered aloud. Maybe they're waiting for us to surrender. Daniel replied grimly. Or maybe they're deciding how best to destroy us. Neither option was comforting. Back on Earth, Rachel Carter watched the news unfold in horror. Footage from drones that had escaped EOS 7 showed the chaos, the falling buildings, the fires, the terrified faces of survivors. Her hands shook as she clutched her phone, desperate to hear from Daniel. But all communication with the colony had been cut off. She wasn't alone in her worry. Across the globe, people gathered around screens, watching the nightmare play out. Governments held emergency meetings, debating how to respond. Some argued for immediate retaliation, while others urged caution. After all, humanity had never faced an enemy like this before. Rachel refused to sit idle. She called Alex Bennett, a colleague and close friend. Alex was an astrophysicist, brilliant and resourceful, with a knack for solving impossible problems. Together, they dug through old records, searching for any information that might help. That's when they stumbled upon something alarming. The aliens calling themselves the Voran Dominion weren't just random invaders. They were part of a vast empire spanning countless star systems. And according to ancient texts translated decades ago, the Voran viewed any species expanding beyond its home planet as a threat. To them, humanity wasn't just trespassing, it was dangerous. This isn't just about EOS 7, Alex said, rubbing his temples. If we don't stop them, they'll come for Earth next. Rachel nodded, dread settling in her stomach. She didn't know how to fight an interstellar war, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to find Daniel. Whatever it took, she would get to him. Meanwhile, on EOS 7, the first attack began. Bright beams of light shot down from the alien ships, striking buildings and turning them to rubble. Explosions rocked the ground, sending debris flying everywhere. Screams filled the air as people fled for cover. Daniel ducked behind a wall, shielding his face from the heat and smoke. Beside him, John loaded a makeshift gun, his jaw clenched tight. We can't hold them off forever, John muttered. We need reinforcements. But who's coming to save us? Daniel asked bitterly. We're on our own. For now, survival was all that mattered. One step at a time, one breath at a time, because if they stopped moving, they'd die. And Daniel wasn't ready to give up, not yet. The first attack on EOS 7 had been brutal. The alien ships, looming like dark mountains in the sky, unleashed their weapons without mercy. Buildings crumbled into dust, fires raged unchecked, and the air was thick with smoke and screams. Survivors huddled in makeshift shelters, clutching whatever they could find to protect themselves. Among them was Daniel Carter, his hands trembling as he gripped a crude weapon made from mining tools. He wasn't a fighter by nature, but desperation had pushed him to act. John Miller stood nearby, reloading his own improvised rifle. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but his eyes were sharp and focused. We can't stay here, he said, glancing at the chaos around them. If we don't move soon, they'll find us. Daniel nodded, though his mind raced with questions. Where could they go? The colony's defenses were crumbling, and the aliens seemed unstoppable, but John was right, they couldn't afford to wait. With a deep breath, Daniel turned to Laura Hayes, who was helping tend to the wounded. Laura, we need to organize people, we have to get moving. Laura looked up, her curly hair falling loose around her face. Her hands were stained with blood from bandaging injuries, but she didn't hesitate. I'll gather whoever I can, she said firmly. But where are we going? To the old supply depot, John replied. It's on the edge of the colony near the hills. If we're lucky, we can use the terrain to hide. It was a risky plan, but it was all they had. As Laura went to round up survivors, Daniel and John began clearing a path through the wreckage. Every step felt heavy, not just because of the debris underfoot, but because of the weight of what they'd lost. Homes, friends, neighbors, all gone in an instant. And yet, they pressed on, driven by the stubborn hope that somehow they might survive. Back on Earth, Rachel Carter watched the live footage from EOS 7 with growing dread. The images showed burning buildings, fleeing colonists, and the towering alien ships that dominated the horizon. Her heart ached for Daniel, but there was nothing she could do except watch and wait. She clenched her fists tightly, trying to hold back tears. Sitting beside her was Alex Bennett, his laptop open as he sifted through data about the Voran Dominion. "We need to figure out why they're doing this," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "There has to be a reason." Alex nodded, typing furiously. "From what I've found, the Voran see any species expanding beyond its home planet as a threat. They think we're dangerous, even if we don't mean to be." "That doesn't make sense," Rachel exclaimed. "We weren't hurting anyone. We were just trying to build a new life." "I know," Alex said softly. "But logic doesn't always matter in war. To them, we're invaders, plain and simple." Rachel leaned back in her chair, feeling overwhelmed. What could humanity possibly do against such a powerful enemy? The Voran fleet was enormous, their technology advanced beyond anything humans had ever seen. Even Earth's best scientists would struggle to catch up. Still, Rachel refused to give up. She glanced at Alex. "Is there anything we can use against them? Anything at all?" Alex hesitated, then pulled up another file. "There might be something. Ancient records mention a weapon buried on one of the planets we've colonized. It's called the Nexus Core, and it's supposed to be incredibly powerful. If we can find it—" "Find it?" Rachel interrupted. "How are we supposed to do that? The colonies are under attack." "I don't know yet," Alex admitted. "But it's our best shot. If we can locate the Nexus Core, maybe we can turn the tide." Rachel took a deep breath, determination hardening her expression. "Then we'll find it. Whatever it takes." On EOS 7, the group of survivors finally reached the supply depot. It was a small, unassuming structure nestled against the base of a hill, its metal walls dented and rusted. Inside, shelves lined with canned food and medical supplies offered a glimmer of hope. For now, at least, they were safe. John immediately began organizing the group, assigning tasks to ensure everyone contributed. Some tended to the injured, others scavenged for more supplies, and a few kept watch outside in case the aliens returned. Daniel joined Laura in setting up communication equipment, hoping to send a distress signal to Earth. "It's not much," Laura said as she adjusted the antenna. "But it's better than nothing." Daniel nodded, his fingers brushing against hers as he handed her a tool. "We'll make it work. We have to." As they worked, whispers spread among the survivors about the aliens' motives. Why had they attacked? What did they want? No one had answers, only fear. One man, older and grizzled, muttered bitterly, "They came out of nowhere. We didn't do anything to them." His words hung heavy in the air, a reminder of how powerless they truly were. Yet amidst the despair there was also resilience. These people had survived the initial assault and they weren't ready to give up. Meanwhile, Rachel and Alex continued their research, piecing together fragments of information about the Nexus Core. According to the records, it was buried deep beneath the surface of EOS 7, hidden within a labyrinth of tunnels. Activating it required solving complex puzzles left behind by an ancient civilization. Failure meant certain death or worse, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction. "This is insane," Rachel muttered, staring at the screen. "Even if we manage to find it, how are we supposed to activate it?" "One problem at a time," Alex replied calmly. "First, we need to get someone to EOS 7. Then we'll worry about the rest." Rachel nodded reluctantly. She knew what that meant, risking everything to reach Daniel. The thought terrified her, but she couldn't imagine staying behind while he fought for his life. "I'm going," she said firmly. Alex raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? This isn't going to be easy." "I don't care," Rachel shot back. "He's my husband. I'm not letting him face this alone." Alex sighed but didn't argue. Instead, he began making arrangements for a rescue mission. Time was running out. The Voran fleet was already moving toward other colonies, and Earth itself wasn't far behind as a target. Humanity needed a miracle, and Rachel was determined to deliver one. Back on EOS 7, night fell, casting the landscape in eerie shadows. The twin suns disappeared below the horizon, leaving only the glow of distant fires to illuminate the ruins. Daniel sat outside the depot, staring up at the stars. He wondered if Rachel was looking at the same sky, thinking of him. The thought brought both comfort and pain. "You should get some rest," Laura said, sitting beside him. Her voice was gentle, tinged with exhaustion. "I can't," Daniel admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see everything." Laura nodded silently. She understood. They all carried the weight of what had happened, etched into their memories, like scars. But they couldn't afford to dwell on it. Not now. Survival depended on staying alert, staying strong. "I keep thinking about Earth," Daniel continued. "About Rachel. Do you think she's okay?" "She's fine," Laura assured. "Him. She's tough, just like you. And she loves you. That counts for something." Daniel managed a faint smile. "Thanks, Laura. I needed to hear that." As they sat together in silence, the sound of footsteps approached. It was John, his face grim. "We've got trouble," he said. Scouts spotted movement near the hills. "They're coming." Fear rippled through the group, but they didn't panic. Instead, they prepared. Weapons were checked, positions fortified, and plans reviewed. They might not win this fight, but they would make the aliens pay dearly for every inch of ground, and so under the cold light of alien stars, humanity dug in for another battle. Outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched, but still unwilling to surrender. The night on EO7 was long and tense. The survivors huddled inside the supply depot, their ears straining to catch any sound of the approaching enemy. Outside, the wind howled through the hills, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and ash. Daniel Carter sat near the entrance, clutching his makeshift weapon tightly. His hands were steady now, but his mind raced with fear and doubt. Could they really hold off the aliens again? Or was this just delaying the inevitable? John Miller paced back and forth, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the depot's walls. He had positioned a few volunteers at key points around the building, hoping to create some kind of defense. But he knew it wasn't enough. The Voran Dominion's weapons were far superior, and their numbers seemed endless. Still, John refused to give up. "We've got no choice," he muttered under his breath. "If we run, they'll hunt us down." Laura Hayes knelt beside an injured woman, tending to her wounds as best she could. Supplies were running low, and many of the survivors were exhausted. Some had lost family members or friends in the initial attack, and their grief weighed heavily on the group. Laura tried to stay strong for them, offering words of encouragement whenever she could. "We're still here," she told the woman softly. "That means something." But even Laura couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. The aliens were coming, and there was no way to stop them. All they could do was fight and hope. Back on Earth, Rachel Carter and Alex Bennett worked tirelessly to prepare for the rescue mission. They convinced government officials to send a small fleet of ships to EO7, armed with whatever weapons humanity could muster. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Rachel insisted on joining the mission, despite the risks. She couldn't sit idly by while Daniel fought for his life. As the ships were being loaded, Rachel stood on the launch pad, staring up at the stars. Her heart ached with worry, but she also felt a flicker of determination. She wasn't just doing this for Daniel, she was doing it for everyone on EOS-7. If they failed, the Voran would target Earth next. There was no room for failure. Alex joined her, holding a tablet filled with maps and data. "We've plotted a course to EO7, he said. "It'll take us a few days to get there. Hopefully your husband and the others can hold out until then." "They will," Rachel replied firmly. "Daniel's smart. He'll find a way to survive." Alex nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced. The odds were stacked against them, and time was running out. The Voran fleet was already moving toward other colonies, destroying everything in its path. Earth's leaders debated whether to focus on defense or launch a counterattack, but Rachel knew they couldn't wait. "We have to act now," she told Alex. "If we hesitate, it's over." On EO7, the first signs of the alien advance came just before dawn. Shadows moved along the base of the hills, too fast and too quiet to be human. John spotted them first, his sharp eyes catching the glint of metal in the dim light. "They're here!" he shouted, raising his weapon. The survivors sprang into action, taking their positions behind makeshift barricades. Daniel crouched near the entrance, his heart pounding as he waited for the attack. Beside him, Laura clutched a welding torch, its blue flame flickering nervously. "Stay close," Daniel whispered. "We'll get through this." The aliens struck without warning. Bright beams of energy sliced through the air, cutting down anyone caught in their path. The survivors returned fire, their crude weapons sparking, uselessly against the armored suits of the Voran soldiers. Despite the odds, they fought fiercely, determined not to go down without a fight. John led the charge, shouting orders and firing his rifle with precision. "Fall back," he yelled when the enemy pushed forward. "Regroup at the depot." The survivors retreated, dragging their wounded with them. Inside the building, they barricaded the doors and prepared for the final stand. Daniel helped Laura tend to the injured, his hands trembling as he applied bandages. "We can't keep this up," he said quietly. "They'll break through eventually." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Then we make them pay for every second." As the battle raged outside, John gathered the group for a quick meeting. "We need a plan," he said, his voice firm despite the chaos. "If we can hold them off long enough, maybe Earth will send help." "Help?" one man scoffed. "Who's coming to save us? We're on our own." "We don't know that," John snapped. "We have to believe someone's coming. Until then, we fight." Daniel stepped forward, his expression resolute. "John's right, we can't give up, not yet." Inspired by his words, the survivors rallied together, pooling their strength for one last effort. They set traps around the depot, using scraps of metal and explosives scavenged from the ruins. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. Meanwhile, Rachel and Alex's ship approached EOS 7, dodging debris from the earlier attacks. Through the viewport, they could see the devastation below, burning buildings, shattered domes, and the looming shapes of alien ships. Rachel's stomach churned with fear, but she forced herself to stay focused. "How bad is it?" she asked Alex. "Bad," he admitted. "But there are still signs of life. If we move quickly, we might be able to reach them." Rachel nodded, gripping the edge of her seat. "Then let's move." As the ship descended, the Voran fleet detected their presence. Alarms blared and enemy fighters streaked across the sky, heading straight for them. The pilot swerved wildly, trying to evade their attacks. "Hold on," he shouted as the ship rocked violently. Rachel closed her eyes, praying they'd make it to the surface in one piece. She thought of Daniel, imagining him fighting for his life somewhere below. "Hang on," she whispered. "I'm coming." Back on EOS 7, the aliens finally breached the depot. The survivors fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and overwhelmed. Just as all hope seemed lost, a loud roar echoed through the sky. A human ship descended, its cannons blazing as it unleashed a barrage of fire on the Voran forces. "We're saved," someone cried, tears streaming down their face. But Daniel knew better. This was only the beginning. The real fight was just getting started. The arrival of the human ship was like a miracle. Its sleek form descended from the sky, firing powerful blasts that scattered the Voran soldiers attacking the depot. The survivors inside cheered, their spirits lifted for the first time in days. Daniel Carter watched through a crack in the barricaded door as the ship landed nearby, kicking up clouds of red dust. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe they might actually survive. John Miller wasted no time. "Get ready," he shouted, motioning for everyone to gather their weapons and wounded. "We're moving out." Laura Hayes helped an injured woman to her feet, supporting her as they limped toward the exit. Her hands trembled, but she kept going, driven by hope. "This is it," she said to Daniel as they stepped outside. "Our chance." The human ship stood tall against the alien landscape, its engines humming with power. Soldiers poured out, clad in advanced armor and carrying weapons far superior to anything the survivors had managed to cobble together. One of them, A tall man with a stern face approached John. "We don't have much time," he said. "More. Foreign ships are on the way. We need to evacuate now." John nodded grimly. "Understood. Lead the way." As the group moved toward the ship, Rachel Carter stepped off the ramp, her eyes scanning the crowd frantically. She spotted Daniel immediately and froze, her breath catching in her throat. He looked thinner, dirtier, and more exhausted than she'd ever seen him, but he was alive. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment everything else faded away. "Rachel?" Daniel whispered, barely able to believe it. Then he broke into a run, closing the distance between them. They embraced, tightly, tears streaming down both their faces. "You came," he said hoarsely. "I didn't think you'd come." "I wasn't about to leave you here," Rachel replied, holding him close. "Not again." But there was no time for reunions. The sound of explosions nearby reminded them of the danger they were still in. Alex Bennett appeared beside Rachel, his laptop clutched in one hand. "We need to go," he urged. "Now!" The survivors boarded quickly, squeezing into every available space. The injured were laid out on stretchers while others huddled together, clutching whatever belongings they'd managed to save. As soon as everyone was aboard, the ship lifted off, leaving the burning ruins of EO7 behind. Inside the ship, the mood was tense but hopeful. Laura sat near Daniel and Rachel, her head resting against the wall as she tried to catch her breath. "I can't believe we made it," she murmured. "For a while I thought—" "You did great," Daniel interrupted gently. "All of you did. We wouldn't be here without you." Rachel listened quietly, taking in the faces of the survivors. Many were bruised and bloodied, their clothes torn and dirty. But despite their exhaustion, there was a spark of resilience in their eyes. These people had faced unimaginable horrors, and yet they had survived. Alex approached the group, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, glancing at Rachel. "About the Nexus Core." Daniel frowned. "What's that?" "It's a weapon," Rachel explained. "An ancient one buried somewhere on this planet. If we can find it, we might have a chance against the Vorin." "A weapon?" John asked skeptically. "You really think we can use something that old?" "It's our best shot," Alex replied. "The records say it's incredibly powerful, enough to level entire planets if used correctly." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "And where exactly is this thing?" "Deep underground," Alex admitted. "In a series of tunnels beneath the colony. Getting to it won't be easy." "We don't have a choice," Rachel said firmly. "If we don't try, the Vorin will keep coming. Earth is next." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew she was right. The Vorin Dominion saw humanity as a threat, and they wouldn't stop until every last human was wiped out. Finding the Nexus Core wasn't just about survival, it was about protecting their home. Back on the bridge of the ship, the pilot guided them toward a safe distance from the planet. The Vorin fleet was already regrouping, preparing for another assault. "We need to act fast," the stern-faced soldier said. "Once they realize what we're after, they'll do everything they can to stop us." Rachel turned to Daniel. "Will you help me? We'll need someone who knows the area." Daniel hesitated. He wanted nothing more than to stay safe aboard the ship, reunited with Rachel. But he couldn't ignore the responsibility weighing on his shoulders. "I'm in," he said finally. "Let's do this." John volunteered as well, along with Laura and a few others. Together, they formed a small team tasked with locating the Nexus Core. The rest of the survivors would remain on the ship, guarded by the soldiers. The journey back to the surface was nerve-wracking. The ship hovered low over the hills, avoiding detection as much as possible. When they landed, the team disembarked cautiously, their weapons at the ready. The landscape was eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the wind and the distant rumble of alien engines. Alex led the way, consulting his laptop for directions. "According to the maps, the entrance should be around here," he said, pointing to a rocky outcrop. Sure enough, hidden among the boulders was a dark opening, a tunnel leading deep underground. John peered inside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Looks like we've got company," he muttered, spotting strange markings etched into the walls. "This place has been here a long time." As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder and heavier. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, depicting scenes of war and destruction. Some showed massive machines unleashing devastation, while others depicted figures fleeing in terror. It was clear that whoever had built the Nexus core understood its power and feared it. "This doesn't feel right," Laura whispered, clutching her torch nervously. "Are we sure we should be messing with this?" "We don't have a choice," Daniel replied. "If this thing can stop the Vorin, we have to try." They pressed on, navigating narrow passages and steep drops. At one point, they triggered a trap. A section of the floor collapsed, sending rocks tumbling into the abyss below. Everyone froze, hearts pounding, before continuing carefully. Finally, they reached a large chamber. In the center stood a pedestal, glowing faintly with blue light. Resting atop it was a crystalline object, the Nexus core. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. "That's it," Alex breathed. "That's the weapon." But as Daniel stepped forward to claim it, a holographic figure materialized before them. It was humanoid, with glowing eyes and a voice that echoed ominously. "Warning," it said. "Activation of the Nexus core will result in catastrophic consequences. Proceed at your own peril." The team exchanged uneasy glances. They had found what they came for, but at what cost? The holographic figure hovered silently, its glowing eyes fixed on the group. The message it delivered was clear but chilling. Activating the Nexus core would unleash destruction on a scale none of them could fully comprehend. Daniel Carter felt his stomach twist into knots. He glanced at Rachel, who stood beside him, her face pale but determined. She had risked everything to get here, and now they were faced with an impossible choice. "What does it mean by catastrophic consequences?" Laura Hayes asked nervously, clutching her torch tightly. Her voice echoed in the cavernous chamber, making the warning seem even more ominous. Alex Bennett adjusted his glasses, studying the hologram closely. "It's probably referring to the weapon's power," he said. "This thing wasn't designed for small-scale battles. If we use it, it could destroy the entire planet. Then why did we come here?" John Miller snapped, frustration creeping into his tone. "If this thing is going to blow us all up, what's the point?" "We don't have a choice," Rachel replied firmly. Her voice cut through the tension like a knife. "The Vorin won't stop until they've wiped us out. If we don't fight back, Earth is next. This might be our only chance." Daniel nodded slowly, though his hands trembled as he stared at the crystalline object on the pedestal. It pulsed faintly, almost as if it were alive. "She's right," he said quietly. "We can't give up now." Laura looked around at the others, her eyes wide with fear. "But what if we make things worse? What if using this thing causes more harm than good?" "That's a risk we'll have to take," Alex admitted. "We don't know how the Vorin will react or how far their empire reaches. But one thing is certain. Doing nothing guarantees defeat." John sighed heavily, running a hand over his graying hair. "Fine. Let's say we go through with this. How do we even activate it?" As Alex examined the pedestal, the holographic figure reappeared, speaking again in its cold, mechanical voice. "To proceed, solve the trials of creation. Failure will result in termination." "The trials of creation?" Daniel repeated, frowning. "What does that mean?" "It's a test," Alex explained. "Ancient civilizations often used puzzles or challenges to protect powerful artifacts. Whoever built this wanted to make sure only the worthy could access it." "So we're supposed to solve some kind of riddle?" Laura asked, looking skeptical. "How are we supposed to do that?" "They must have left clues," Alex said, pointing to the carvings on the walls. "These symbols, they're instructions." The team spread out, examining the intricate patterns etched into the stone. Some depicted stars and planets, while others showed strange machines and geometric shapes. Each carving seemed to tell part of a story, but piecing it together was no easy task. "This one looks like coordinates," Rachel said, tracing a series of lines with her finger. "Maybe it's showing where to place something." Daniel nodded, stepping closer to the pedestal. On its surface were several slots, each shaped differently. "Let's try matching the symbols to these slots," he suggested. Working together, the team carefully placed fragments of crystal they found scattered around the chamber into the corresponding slots. As each piece clicked into place, the room began to hum softly, and the glow from the Nexus core grew brighter. "Almost there," Alex muttered, double-checking the final symbol. "Just one more." But before they could finish, the ground beneath them shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the tunnels. "They're here," John shouted, gripping his weapon tightly. Through the entrance of the chamber, shadows moved. Voran soldiers, their armored forms glinting in the dim light. They advanced steadily, weapons raised and ready to fire. "Keep working," Rachel urged, pulling out a pistol she'd been given earlier. "I'll hold them off." "No way," Daniel protested. "You're not doing this alone." "There's no time to argue," Rachel snapped, her voice sharp with urgency. "Finish the puzzle. That's the only way we survive." Reluctantly, Daniel turned back to the pedestal, his heart pounding, as gunfire erupted behind him. Rachel fired repeatedly, forcing the Voran to take cover. Bullets ricocheted off the walls, sending shards of rock flying everywhere. Laura crouched low, shielding her face as debris rained down. "Got it!" Alex exclaimed suddenly, slamming the last piece into place. The humming grew louder and the Nexus core flared with blinding light. The holographic figure reappeared, its voice calm but firm. "Trials completed. Activation sequence initiated." "Now what?" John demanded, reloading his rifle as the Voran regrouped. "We need to get out of here," Alex shouted, already, backing toward the tunnel. "Once this thing goes off, it'll collapse the whole system." The team sprinted for the exit, dodging blasts from the Voran as they fled. Behind them, the chamber began to crumble, chunks of rock falling as the energy from the Nexus core surged uncontrollably. "Move faster!" Rachel yelled, pushing Laura ahead of her. "Don't look back!" They reached the surface just as the ground below them split open, cracks spreading rapidly across the terrain. The ship waited nearby, its engines roaring as the pilot prepared for takeoff. Soldiers rushed to help the team aboard, shouting orders over the chaos. "Everyone inside," the stern-faced soldier commanded. "We're leaving." As the last of the team scrambled aboard, the Nexus core detonated. A massive wave of energy erupted from the planet's core, obliterating everything in its path. The shock wave hit the ship, rocking it violently as it ascended into the sky. Below, EOS 7 disintegrated, reduced to rubble and ash. Inside the ship, silence fell as the survivors watched the planet vanish. Tears streamed down Laura's face as she realized the magnitude of what they had done. "Was it worth it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rachel didn't answer immediately. She stared out the viewport, her mind racing with thoughts of Daniel, the team, and everyone they had lost. Finally she spoke, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "It had to be. For Earth. For everyone still waiting for us." Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her close. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. The ship carrying the survivors of EOS 7 sped away from the destruction, its engines straining against the pull of the collapsing planet. Inside, the mood was heavy with grief and exhaustion. No one spoke as they watched the remains of EOS 7 fade into the void behind them. The once promising colony was gone, reduced to nothing more than a memory, and a painful lesson. Daniel Carter sat quietly in a corner of the cabin, his hands resting on his knees. His mind replayed the events over and over. The holograms, warning, the frantic race to activate the Nexus core, and the final moments before the planet's destruction. He felt a mix of emotions, relief that they had escaped, guilt for what they had done, and fear about what came next. "We did what we had to do," he muttered under his breath, trying to convince himself it was true. Rachel leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. She hadn't said much since they boarded the ship, but her silence spoke volumes. She knew the cost of their actions weighed heavily on everyone, especially Daniel. For now, she simply held on to him, offering what comfort she could. Laura Hayes sat nearby, staring blankly at the floor. Her curly hair was matted with sweat and dirt, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She couldn't stop thinking about the people they'd left behind, the ones who hadn't made it to the ship. Were they still alive when the Nexus core detonated? Or had they been caught in the chaos earlier? The questions haunted her, but she forced herself not to dwell on them. Instead, she focused on the living, the people around her who needed strength. John Miller paced back and forth, his boots thudding softly against the metal floor. He wasn't used to feeling powerless, but right now there was nothing he could do except wait. The Voran fleet was still out there, regrouping after the loss of their forces on EOS 7. They would come again, that much was certain. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready. Back on Earth, news of EOS 7's destruction spread quickly. Governments convened emergency meetings. Military leaders scrambled to prepare defenses, and ordinary citizens braced themselves for the worst. Footage of the planet's demise played on every screen, showing the massive energy wave consuming everything in its path. It was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, a stark reminder of the stakes humanity faced. Alex Bennett worked tirelessly alongside Rachel, analyzing data from the mission and preparing reports for Earth's leaders. "This changes everything," he said, rubbing his temples. "The Voran know we're capable of fighting back. They won't underestimate us anymore." "But at what cost?" Rachel asked bitterly. "EOS 7 is gone. All those people—" "It wasn't your fault," Alex replied firmly. "You gave them a chance to fight. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Rachel nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. She had led the rescue mission, pushed for the activation of the Nexus core, and made decisions that had cost countless lives. Was it worth it? Would anyone ever understand? As the ship approached Earth, the survivors prepared for what lay ahead. They knew they wouldn't receive a hero's welcome. What they had done on EOS 7 was controversial at best, a desperate gamble that had saved some but doomed others. Still, they were determined to share their story and warn humanity about the threat posed by the Voran Dominion. When the ship landed, government officials were waiting. Soldiers escorted the survivors to a secure facility where debriefings began immediately. One by one, they recounted their experiences: the initial attack, the struggle to survive, and the discovery of the Nexus core. Some broke down in tears. Others spoke with grim determination. Through it all, Rachel remained calm, answering questions clearly and concisely. "The Voran see us as a threat," she explained during one session. "They won't stop until they've eliminated us completely. If we want to survive, we need to unite. Every nation, every person, we're all in this together." Her words resonated deeply, sparking discussions among world leaders. For years, humanity had struggled with division, prioritizing individual interests over collective survival. But now, faced with an existential threat, old rivalries began to fade. Slowly but surely, nations started working together, pooling resources and sharing technology to prepare for the inevitable war. In the weeks that followed, humanity transformed. Factories once used to produce consumer goods were repurposed to manufacture weapons and spacecraft. Scientists raced to reverse engineer Voran tech recovered from EOS 7, hoping to close the gap between human and alien capabilities. Training programs turned ordinary citizens into soldiers overnight, teaching them how to fight in space and on foreign worlds. Among the newly formed resistance was Laura Hayes, who found purpose in helping organize civilian efforts. Though she had never imagined herself as a leader, her experience on EOS 7 gave her insight into what it took to survive. She traveled across Earth, speaking to crowds about the importance of unity and resilience. "We lost so much," she told them during one speech. "But we're still here, And as long as we stand together, we can win. John Miller also played a key role, leading combat training for recruits. His no-nonsense approach earned him respect, even from those who doubted their ability to face the Vorin. "You think you're scared now?" he barked during a drill. "Imagine being out there staring down an enemy you can't beat. You'll wish you'd trained harder, so get moving." Meanwhile, Daniel and Rachel worked closely with Alex to analyze the remnants of the Nexus Core's energy signature. They hoped to replicate its power, or at least understand it better. It was dangerous work, but they knew it might be humanity's only hope of matching the Vorin's superior technology. Despite these efforts, fear lingered in the hearts of many. People looked to the sky with dread, wondering when the next attack would come. The Vorin fleet hadn't returned yet, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Intelligence reports suggested they were amassing reinforcements, preparing for a full-scale invasion. Rachel became the face of humanity's resistance, delivering speeches that inspired hope even in the darkest moments. "We've faced impossible odds before," she reminded the world during one broadcast, "and we've always found a way to overcome them. This time will be no different." But privately she worried. The Vorin were relentless, their empire vast and seemingly unstoppable. Could humanity truly stand against such a force? Or would their efforts amount to nothing more than delaying the inevitable? One evening, as she stood on a balcony overlooking the city, Daniel joined her. Neither spoke for a while, content to simply watch the stars. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you think we'll make it?" Rachel hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I don't know. But I do know one thing. We won't give up without a fight." Daniel nodded, taking her hand in his. Together, they gazed upward, searching for answers among the constellations. Whatever happened next, they would face it side by side. The days leading up to the Vorin's next attack were tense. Earth buzzed with activity as humanity prepared for what many feared would be its final stand. Factories worked around the clock, churning out weapons and ships. Scientists pored over data, trying to unlock secrets from the remnants of EOS 7's destruction. Soldiers trained relentlessly, learning how to fight in space and on alien terrain. And civilians did their part too, building shelters, rationing supplies, and doing whatever they could to support the war effort. Rachel Carter became the voice of hope during this time. Her speeches inspired millions, reminding them that humanity had faced impossible challenges before and always found a way to endure. She traveled across the globe, visiting cities and towns, speaking directly to people who felt overwhelmed by fear. "We're stronger together," she told them during one rally. "Every person matters. Every action counts." But even as she spoke those words, Rachel carried her own doubts. The Vorin Dominion was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, an empire vast enough to span galaxies, with technology far beyond human understanding. Could Earth really stand against such a force? Or was all of this preparation just delaying the inevitable? Daniel Carter threw himself into his work alongside Alex Bennett. Together, they studied fragments of the Nexus Core's energy signature, hoping to replicate its power. It was dangerous research, filled with risks, but Daniel knew it might be humanity's best chance. "If we can harness even a fraction of that energy," he said one evening, staring at glowing readings on a monitor, "we might have a fighting chance." Alex nodded, though his expression remained grim. "It's not just about the power," he replied. "The Vorin are organized. They've been doing this for centuries. We're scrambling to catch up, and we don't have much time." Despite the odds, Daniel refused to give up. He thought of EOS 7, of the friends and strangers who had fought so hard to survive. Their sacrifices couldn't be in vain. If there was any way to tip the scales in humanity's favor, he was determined to find it. Laura Hayes spent her days organizing civilian efforts. She coordinated food drives, helped set up underground bunkers, and encouraged communities to stay strong. At first, she doubted her ability to lead. She wasn't a soldier or a scientist, just someone who had survived when others hadn't. But over time, She realized her role was just as important. Without people like her, the soldiers wouldn't have the support they needed to fight. One afternoon, while visiting a shelter packed with families preparing for evacuation, Laura met a young boy named Ethan. His wide eyes stared up at her as he clutched a stuffed animal shaped like a spaceship. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked quietly. Laura knelt beside him, offering a reassuring smile. "We're going to do everything we can to keep you safe," she promised. "And you know what? You're braver than you think." Ethan didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded anyway. Watching him, Laura felt a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity wasn't just fighting for itself. It was fighting for the future. For kids like Ethan who deserved a chance to grow up in peace. John Miller led combat training programs, pushing recruits harder than anyone thought possible. Many of them were ordinary citizens, teachers, farmers, mechanics who had never held a weapon before. But John didn't care about their backgrounds. All that mattered was whether they could hold their ground when the Vorin came. "You think you're scared now?" he barked during one drill, pacing back and forth as sweat dripped from his brow. "Imagine being out there staring down an enemy you can't beat. You'll wish you'd trained harder, so get moving." His tough love earned mixed reactions. Some recruits resented his harsh methods, while others admired his dedication. Either way, no one could deny the results. Under his guidance, raw civilians began to transform into disciplined fighters ready, or as ready as they could be, to face the unknown. As preparations continued, intelligence reports grew increasingly alarming. The Vorin fleet was massive, larger than anything humanity had anticipated. Their ships moved steadily toward Earth, leaving destruction in their wake as they passed through neighboring star systems. Entire colonies fell silent, their fates unknown. Humanity's only advantage was time, the precious weeks it took for the Vorin to reach Earth. During a high-level meeting, Rachel addressed military leaders and government officials. "This isn't just about defending our planet," she said, firmly. "It's about showing the Vorin that we won't go quietly, that we'll fight for every inch of ground." Her words resonated deeply, sparking discussions about strategy. Some argued for focusing defenses on Earth itself, creating layers of protection to slow the Vorin advance. Others pushed for taking the fight to the enemy, launching preemptive strikes to weaken their forces. In the end, a compromise was reached. Earth would be fortified, but smaller strike teams would also target key points in the Vorin fleet. On the eve of the battle, Rachel stood alone in a quiet room, staring at a map of the solar system. Pins marked the positions of human forces and the approaching Vorin fleet. The distance between them was shrinking rapidly, each passing hour bringing the enemy closer. She closed her eyes, imagining Daniel, Laura, and John, all the people who had fought so hard to get here. Would it be enough? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Daniel, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, handing her one. "Thanks," Rachel replied softly, sipping the warm liquid. For a moment, neither spoke, content to simply share the silence. Finally, Daniel broke it. "You ready?" Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Daniel smiled faintly, squeezing her shoulder. "We've made it this far. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together." The next morning, alarms blared across Earth. The Vorin fleet had entered the solar system, their ships blotting out the stars. Panic spread quickly, but humanity responded with surprising calmness. Families retreated to underground bunkers, soldiers manned defensive positions, and strike teams boarded ships bound for the front lines. Rachel delivered a final address to the world, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Today we stand united," she said. "Not because we want to fight, but because we must. For our homes, our families, and our future. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a new chapter for humanity." As her words echoed across the globe, the skies above lit up with fire. The battle had begun. Humanity's ships surged forward, meeting the Vorin head-on. Explosions erupted in the void, lighting up the darkness like fireworks. Soldiers fired their weapons, dodged enemy blasts, and fought with everything they had. Outgunned and outnumbered, they relied on ingenuity and sheer determination to hold their ground. Back on Earth, Rachel watched the battle unfold through live feeds. Tears streamed down her face as she saw lives lost and ships destroyed. But amid the devastation, she also saw courage, ordinary people rising to meet extraordinary challenges. Humanity wasn't winning yet, but it wasn't giving up either. And as the fight raged on, one thing became clear. The Vorin had underestimated their opponents. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for something greater, something worth dying for. The battle raged across the skies, a chaotic symphony of explosions, beams of light, and the deafening roar of engines. Humanity's ships darted through the void like swarms of insects, their movements unpredictable but purposeful. Against them loomed the massive Vorin fleet, dark, angular monoliths that seemed almost invincible. Yet for every human ship lost, 2 more took its place, driven by desperation and sheer willpower. Rachel Carter stood in the command center on Earth, her eyes glued to the screens displaying live footage from the front lines. Her heart pounded with every flash of light, every report of casualties. She clenched her fists tightly, willing herself to stay strong. This wasn't just a fight, it was humanity's last stand. On the battlefield, Daniel Carter piloted a small strike craft alongside other volunteers. They were part of a daring mission to disable one of the Vorin's largest warships, a behemoth that served as the fleet's command center. The odds were stacked against them, but they had no choice. If they could cripple the flagship, it might give Earth's forces a chance to regroup. "This is insane," muttered one of the pilots over the comms, his voice shaking. "We're flying right into their teeth." "Stick to the plan," Daniel replied firmly. "Stay close and follow my lead. We've got this." As the strike team approached the Vorin flagship, enemy fighters swarmed around them, firing relentlessly. Daniel maneuvered his craft with precision, dodging blasts while returning fire. Beside him, another pilot screamed as her ship exploded, leaving only debris behind. Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. There was no time for grief, not now. Finally, they reached the flagship's hull where pre-programmed explosives were deployed. The charges detonated with a brilliant flash, tearing open a section of the ship. For a moment, it seemed like the mission had succeeded, but then alarms blared as backup systems kicked in. The flagship remained operational. "We need to get out of here," someone shouted over the comms. Daniel nodded grimly, leading the surviving pilots back toward Earth's fleet. Behind them, the Vorin retaliated with overwhelming force, their weapons cutting down ships like blades through paper. The human forces retreated, battered but not broken. Back on Earth, Laura Hayes worked tirelessly to keep morale high among the civilians sheltering underground. She moved between bunkers, offering words of encouragement and helping organize supplies. Despite the fear etched on people's faces, she saw resilience, a determination to survive no matter what happened above. "You think we'll make it?" asked an elderly woman, clutching her granddaughter's hand tightly. Laura knelt beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "We have to believe we will," she said softly. "Humanity doesn't give up. Not when there's still hope." Her words carried weight, even if she didn't fully believe them herself. Outside, the sounds of destruction grew louder, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Each explosion felt like a countdown to the end. John Miller led a group of soldiers defending one of Earth's orbital stations. The structure was critical to humanity's communications network, and the Vorin were determined to destroy it. John stood at the forefront, shouting orders as his team fired upon advancing enemies. "Hold the line," he barked, reloading his weapon. "Don't let them through." The fighting was brutal, with both sides suffering heavy losses. John watched as comrades fell beside him, their sacrifices buying precious seconds for reinforcements to arrive. He knew they couldn't hold forever, but every second counted. Suddenly, a massive blast rocked the station, sending John sprawling to the ground. His ears rang, and smoke filled the air. Through the haze, he saw Vorin soldiers breaching the perimeter. Gripping his rifle tightly, John rose to his feet, ready to fight until his last breath. As the battle intensified, Rachel delivered a final address to the world. Standing before cameras in a dimly lit room, her face was streaked with dirt and tears, but her voice remained steady. To everyone listening, she began, this is not the end. No matter what happens today, remember who we are. We are survivors, we are dreamers, and above all, we are human. Her words echoed across the planet, reaching millions huddled in bunkers or watching silently from safe zones. For many, it was a reminder of why they were fighting, not just for survival, but for the future they hoped to build. The Vorin see us as a threat, Rachel continued, and maybe they're right, because humanity has always pushed forward, no matter the cost. Today we show them that spirit cannot be destroyed. With those words, she turned off the camera and joined Alex Bennett in monitoring the battle. Together they analyzed data streams, looking for any advantage they could exploit. It was a long shot, but humanity had always thrived on long shots. In space, the tide of the battle began to shift. Using reverse-engineered Vorin technology, human engineers had developed a prototype weapon capable of disrupting the aliens' shields. Though untested, it was deployed in a last-ditch effort to turn the tables. The weapon fired, releasing a pulse of energy that spread outward like a shockwave. Vorin ships faltered, their defenses flickering and failing. Seizing the opportunity, Earth's forces launched a coordinated assault targeting weakened vessels with everything they had. For the first time, the Vorin hesitated. Their once unstoppable fleet reeled under the unexpected counterattack. Ships exploded in bursts of light, and their formation began to crumble. But victory came at a cost. Human forces were decimated, their ships reduced to drifting wreckage. Survivors limped back toward Earth, battered but alive. Among them was Daniel, his craft barely holding together as he guided it through the chaos. When the dust settled, the Vorin fleet withdrew, retreating into deep space. It wasn't a complete victory. Earth's defenses were in ruins and countless lives had been lost, but it was enough. Humanity had proven itself a formidable opponent, one the Vorin would think twice about attacking again. Rachel watched the receding ships on a monitor, her body trembling with exhaustion. She turned to Alex, who stood beside her. "Did we win?" she asked quietly. Alex shook his head. "Not yet, but we bought ourselves time. Time was all they needed." Across the planet, survivors emerged from bunkers, blinking in the sunlight. The sky was scarred with smoke and ash, but it was still theirs. Together they began to rebuild, vowing never to forget the lessons learned. As Rachel stepped outside, she whispered a single word into her comm unit. "Run." It wasn't a plea for escape, it was a promise. Humanity would run toward hope, toward a brighter future. Because even in the darkest moments, the human spirit endured.